My name is Matthew Ball, and today I'll be giving my informative speech. And for my audience, I have my parents on the line with my brother. Those are my three people. And yeah, they're coming in from New Jersey. All right. The will of God is something that is easily misunderstood. People just don't understand how the will of God can have such a massive effect on their life and what they're doing to miss out on that. So, the will of God can be explained and kind of portrayed as a map. Now, today, what I have is a small map of Paris. Now, this isn't the entire map, this is just a small little square, one segment of the map. Now, this can be an example of God's will because God reveals his will one step at a time. Now, when you're looking at this map, you may be asking a few questions like what is this? Oh, where does it go? What does it show? What is the demographic? Where is it from? Where does it lead? Can I see more of it? Should I see all of it? Do I need to see all of it right now? And a lot of times when you're looking at a map, you're looking at it in the car because you're trying to get somewhere. So you as a driver aren't trying to look at it as much as the passenger is. Now this can also be an example of Will's God. I mean God, sorry, God's will is that he's the one in control. He's the one that's looking at the entire map while you as a driver are just following the instructions. But enough on that right now. We're going to be talking about the misunderstandings of God's will. So I'm going to be talking about three things. The first thing is going to be misunderstanding the will of God. The second is some clarity, some functions of the will of God. And the third one's going to be just the different kinds of wills of God. That there are two different kinds of wills of God, and that one of them is dependent on you and one is not. So first thing I'm going to be talking about is misunderstandings of the will of God. Now, people have this misunderstanding that God must just pave the way, that He's going to provide everything you need for His will. That you don't have to do anything. He's just going to kind of spoon feed it to you. Now, this is just a misunderstanding because God wants to develop character in you. He doesn't want to just feed you everything and you just be the mindless robot just doing everything He's telling you to do. He wants to develop character and relationship with you. That it can be stated by Pastor Kevin Thompson. He stated that it's God's will is God's desire to create a relationship with you. And now the second misunderstanding that people have is that if life is getting difficult, then it must not be God's will because God doesn't want us to live a hard life. He wants us to live a life with Him. Now that can be a misunderstanding because if you look at the will of God's will over Paul in the New Testament is that he was going throughout the nations ministering to Jews and Gentiles alike. But what happened throughout his ministry is he was being persecuted, he was thrown in jail, he was being beaten, stoned, but that did not disrupt the will of God on his life. In fact, it just kind of just drove it forward. It developed character in him. Now after talking about misunderstandings of the will of God, now we're going to take a look at that God's will is just a lot more complicated and too complicated for us to understand at the moment. Now, if you look at this map once again, you'll see that looking at this one little segment, you can get a rough understanding of where you are and the next step of where you're going. But if we take a look at the full map right here, we're going to look at God's will from what you want to know. Well, you want to know every step of God's will, right? So you may be right here, but God wants to take you all the way down here. Now what you're seeing is you're seeing a lot of roads right there that you're seeing that there are multiple ways to get to that end point. Now at this point, it's your decision how you get there. But the whole point of God's will is trusting in Him that He knows the way and that you're going to be following it step by step. Now when you're seeing the entire viewpoint, what you're seeing is you're seeing all the side roads, you're seeing all the distractions, you're seeing all the things that can just deviate you from God's will in your life. Now these little side roads distractions can be like just not listening to God at the point in time that He's called you to do something, or deciding that you're going to go a different way than what His will for you at the moment is. It's creating a deviation or distraction from where He wants to take you. Now, just taking another step at this, you may be looking at this and you be a little disoriented because you got just so much to look at. What God's doing is He's narrowing down where to be looking. Like back to the driver and the passenger scenario. You are the driver in your life, but you have God being, He's your backseat driver. He's the one that's going to be directing where you're going. That's what God's will is. He's going to be looking at that map, telling you what that next step is. What's the next road you're going to turn on to? How long are you going to be on that road for? So that's just another thing. That even goes back to just perspective of God waiting, uh, people waiting for God to just pave the way in their lives because they're waiting for Him to speak and tell them what the next thing is, but they're not continuing on the road that God has for them in that moment. Now, God has a tendency to just reveal His will one step at a time. Like I said, He's just going to tell you, hey, turn here, keep on going here, just be patient, just wait. But you got to remember that God will create seasons of patience. Seasons of patience are there to build character and to develop you for the next step in His will. Now, there are two different wills of God, and John Piper states that there is the sovereign will of God, and then there's the will of command. Now, the sovereign will of God is God's inevitable will. It's going to happen regardless of what you do, whether you obey or whether you disobey. God's will, like that He will come one day, He will judge us, and that we will live in heaven forever. Now, that is the inevitable will of God, but then there is the will of command. That's the will, God's will over our lives now. It's God's will over what decisions we make and how we're going to lead our lives. So those are the two wills of God, and one and the will of command is one that we're focused on is what He wants for us in our lives. So to conclude all of this, that there's just the misunderstanding that God needs to pave the way, and um, that God needs to pave the way, and that we should just wait for Him, and if it's too hard, then it must not be the will of God. Those are just misunderstandings. That when we look at it, God wants to be the one that's developing us throughout the journey, and He wants to help us just take that one step at a time, directing us and building character. And that we just got to make sure that we're not misunderstanding God's will command over the God's will sovereignty, or vice versa. So back to the map, just that's a great analogy just of the will of God and the fact that He's directing us from the passenger seat on which street we need to turn on to next. We just have to have faith that He's leading us in the right direction. Thank you.
Very good.